congregation here is called Memorial Presbyterian Church. We are sometimes referred to as Flagler Memorial Presbyterian Church because our current sanctuary was donated by Henry Morrison Flagler, who was a co-founder in the Standard Oil Trust. Flagler was very devastated by the loss of his daughter. He had a very close relationship with Jenny Louise, and her death meant a great loss to him, of course. So he wanted to do something in her memory, and the church was basically that memorial to her. Construction began in 1889. Flagler had stipulated that he wanted it completed within 1 year of his daughter's death, so that during the dedication they could celebrate not only the completion of the building, but the 1-year anniversary of his daughter's death. March 16, 1890 was the dedication service for this church. The Vice President of the United States and his wife were present. There was a very large crowd here in St. Augustine. Mr. Flagler had chosen Carrere and Hastings, who were the architects for the Ponce de Leon Hotel, to design the structure of the church and the adjoining manse where the minister would live. As one can see from aerial photos of the church is laid out in the form of a Latin cross, which is following the tradition of European cathedrals. A lot of people see European detail in the architecture of the church and even in the inside. And the reason for that is Carrere and Hastings trained in Europe, in Paris, as most architects at the time. The church building is constructed with poured concrete, which was the typical method for Flagler during the early 1890s. There is no doubt that there was a large workforce involved in the construction of the church. Local legend is that there were 500 men working during the day and 500 men at night. We don't have any records for this, but we do all agree that it was probably a very large workforce. Probably the most prominent feature of the church is the dome. The dome rises about 100 feet into the air. At the top of the dome, there is a cross that adds 20 feet to the top of the dome. At the center of the dome is Christ's crown of thorns. There is a triangle and 3 dots representing the Holy Trinity, and then the Hebrew word for God is printed on the inside of the dome. In addition, Flagler brought a lot of the fixtures that you see around the church, terracotta, the wood, the pews, and the doors. They were shipped from Europe to New York and then brought by train along Flagler's Railroad to St. Augustine. Throughout the church, you will find mahogany that was all hand-carved. The mahogany came from Santo Domingo in the Caribbean, and it was hand-carved by Bavarian craftsmen. Within the church, there are bronze chandeliers that hang from the ceiling, and those are cruciform chandeliers with the sign of the cross. Shortly after the dedication of the church building, Mr. Flagler and the then minister of the church decided to add stained glass windows to the structure. The artist that they chose was Herman Schlattermunt, and he had worked with Louis Comfort Tiffany on the windows in the Ponce de Leon Hotel, which is now Flagler College. The theme that was chosen is the Apostles' Creed because it changes very little from the different denominations of Christianity. They wanted something that would be understood by all Christians, not just Presbyterians. Today, there are about 92 stained glass windows throughout the whole church. They took about 12 years to be completed and be installed in the church. There is one window we believe is a Tiffany original. Typical for Tiffany, many of his windows in the early years were not signed. The reason we feel that it is a Tiffany window is that it doesn't follow the Apostles' Creed. It is located within the sanctuary with a picturesque scene typical of Tiffany windows. Many people always comment about the layout of the church and how unique it is because the south door is not actually the main door of the church, the east door is. When you walk into the east door, you're looking straight ahead into the pulpit and the lectern and up into the organ. To your right, there is a chapel area which was intended for Sunday school facilities. In 1926, the adjoining manse was converted to Sunday school classrooms and a fellowship hall was added. So now the chapel is basically used for smaller services during Holy Week. And we do have 2 rooms off of the chapel. The room on the left is called the Flagler Room. It has pictures of the Flagler family as well as a model of Kirkside, which was Flagler's home here in St. Augustine. And on the right side, we have the history room for the congregation, pictures of the congregation from the congregational history, and one of the original plans for the church, as well as one of the chandeliers that we've had restored back to its original state. When you walk into the main east door, at the very front is our baptismal font. It is a solid piece of marble, hand-carved by 3 generations of Italian craftsmen. It was a gift of Frederick Benedict, who was married to Jenny Louise at the time of her death, and would have been the father of little Marjorie, her baby. Above the baptismal font is the eagle lectern. That's where the scripture is read during the sermon. And then to your right is the shell canopy, which is where the minister will deliver the sermon. At the south end of the church, there is a gallery, which was originally in the designs for the church, but was never completed. Because Flagler wanted the church building done within a year, many things were cut or altered from the original plans. In 1904, Henry Flagler added a mausoleum to the church. He wanted his first wife and daughter to be buried here in the sanctuary. Their bodies were interred in New York's Woodlawn Cemetery, and Flagler had them exhumed and brought down by train to St. Augustine and reburied in the mausoleum. In 1912, when Mr. Flagler himself passed away, his body was laid to rest here as well. During the service, you don't see or hear the organist and the choir. They are located behind the carved mahogany choir screen. The organist sits behind the center panel of that choir screen, and then the choir sits around him. The organ is a 4-manual, 90-rank Aeolian Skinner pipe organ. It has a little over 5,000 pipes to it, so it definitely packs a wallop. We welcome anyone to come to Memorial Presbyterian and learn more about our church, but also to learn more about the church behind the church building. There's so much here that is beautiful and old, but there is so much about our congregation that is open and welcoming, and we would love to have you.